there was so much that wasn't clear yet when I was talking about the technology part. And the technology is so interesting and important and exciting because finally, instead of finding all this abstract stuff that you learned in the first 5 weeks about ways of being and revealing and concealing and modes of revealing and so forth, finally you get to your own mode of revealing, and you get to bring your own experience and phenomenology into relation with this very abstract Heideggerian way of thinking about it, and that is very exciting, I think. But I was tired, and it was so hard, and so I'm going to go review, wrote out as clearly as I could what I thought the general point of all this was. So our practices have two major ways of working: as bringing forth in pre-modernity and as challenging forth ever since modernity. In bringing forth, we have a nurturing relation to things, in a sense that we have to harbor and protect the things and the clearing. But there was this confusion because this bringing forth, this poesis, Heidegger uses it as a general term for a nurturing relation to things. He never uses it, just because I think it would be pedagogically confusing, for the equally nurturing relation we have to have toward the clearing. He calls that safekeeping. The clearing is granted to us for safekeeping. It gets translated on 33. And the footnote says that means, or is related to the verb, to watch over, to keep safe, and to preserve. So just as we're preservers of works of art by acting in their light and doing what it makes sense to do, so, and in the same, not only in the same sense, but so to speak, at the same time, we're preserving the clearing and nurturing it by bringing out as clearly as we can what the clearing, what understanding of being and of us the clearing is granting us. And of course, that's a lot clearer when it happens in the Oresteia, say, because the Athenians had a sense of their role as preservers, than it is later. But it nonetheless, any clearing needs us and depends on us to be what it is through our practices and our preserving. Now, as I say, the Athenians had a sense of that, and it got lost later. But it didn't get completely lost as long as there was metaphysics. I wasn't very clear about this. Metaphysics is ambiguous. I mean, in a certain way, it's a bad thing. And by bad thing, I mean it covers up the clearing and substitutes for the clearing the ontotheological story that there is one beingness being, and that being creates, that is, that's to Christians, that being is responsible for the existence of and intelligibility of everything. But the metaphysicians are obviously sensitive to the fact that something or other is, so to speak, making it possible for things to show up as anything. And that's their sense of the clearing still. But the people who live with the metaphysical practices would still have a sense that something special was going on. Take the Christians. Namely, God had created and preserved everything and made it all intelligible. And they would all have a sense, when they're in metaphysics, that it was their job to get into the right relation to this metaphysical story about whatever it was that was the source of the existence and intelligibility of everything. So as long as there's metaphysics, there is a sense of our being receivers and preservers, though a very dim sense and covered up and distorted sense, and it gets worse and worse. Our sense of being receivers gets less and less, until by the time you get to Nietzsche, you get the idea, Heidegger thinks, that we're not really receivers anymore, but we are the orderers of everything. And with Nietzsche, too, you get the idea that metaphysics is complete nonsense and a waste of time and never was on to anything. and that being was really just a vapor and a nothing. And by then, we've lost all touch with the clearing. But nonetheless, when we're challenged forth to treat everything as resources and challenging everything forth, we are still responding to the clearing. I mean, we're being called by the practices or by the style to challenge, but that is, we're being called, that is, challenged forth by this technicity style to challenge everything else forth. But we have no sense anymore, once we're in the technicity understanding, that there's anything else that needs to be understood or appreciated about why anything exists or why anything makes sense. It just seems obvious that everything is resources, and it makes sense that we treat ourselves and everything else flexibly. And one of the things that happens is all the other modes of revealing can be co-opted and made efficient, and thereby, as Heidegger puts it, technicity drives out every other mode of revealing. That sounds like the wrong way to put it. I mean, that's like driving everything out to the periphery, like driving the witches and the pagans out of the town into the woods or something. It's not like that. In a way, it's worse than that. Every other mode of revealing can be taken over and made efficient. That is, for instance, playing with children, which is a nurturing kind of practice that's still around, turns into a challenging forth practice where you were challenged forth to challenge forth the kid to get the most out of its brain and its body, and you take it around to its athletic courses and its martial arts courses, and it listens to Mozart and all this in order to get itself and challenge it in all sorts of ways. And nothing resists that. It always looks like whatever you're trying to do, thanks to technicity, you can do it better. So it can take over the nurturing, it can take over the thesis, it can take over the objectification, and always it looks like it's doing it for its own good, so to speak. Boardman has a good sense of that in what you have read. I mean, the thing about technological devices is they provide exactly what you want in the most immediate, most flexible way. You already get that with these devices in the subject-object stage, and you get them even more the more they get flexible. I thought of a funny story. I used to say, before I understood how complicated this was, and I was sort of wrong, that the perfect example of a technological object was a styrofoam cup, because it satisfied your desires for keeping the liquid, whatever you wanted, and then when you were finished with it, you could just throw it away. And now I think the styrofoam cup is really in the subject-object thing. There you are as a subject with desires, and there you got this object, and you make it to a Gegenstand, a thing that does just what you want to have done, and then you dispose of it. And I used to contrast it with Japanese keeping ceremonial teacups that are full of significance and passed on from generation to generation, but they're delicate, and they break, and they have to be washed, you have to take care of them, and store them, and bring them out again, and how inefficient that is, or how that takes so much trouble to satisfy the desire that the styrofoam cup satisfies so clearly. That's not wrong, but that's still too subject-object. But I then thought, and this is the further, the styrofoam cup's a little more, it's on the way from being an object to being standing reserve, because it's efficient in the sense that it keeps hot things hot and cold things cold. It's got a certain kind of flexibility about it, and that's getting to be what you want. I mean, if I can't picture what it would be to go further, but if it had even more flexibility somehow, it would be, and it wouldn't just be satisfying your desire for drinks. I don't know how to picture that. Anyway, the more it gets to do lots of different things and could fill in lots of different functions, the more it stops looking like an object and starts looking like standing reserve. And then, that was an aside. Now back to, and we become resources too. And I'm talking about the special evils, I haven't made it clear, the special dangers in Heidegger language of this last, and he says it's the last, and other places. This last understanding of being. And I'm telling you really why it's the last, which is the danger. One, it has this business of not driving out, but taking over and turning into technicity every other mode of revealing, and all the marginal practices out of which you could ever make any new mode of revealing. So insofar as it goes, as it reaches its culmination, there'll be no place for a new understanding of being, no marginal practices to reconfigure and make center. Everything will just be efficient. That's half the danger. The other half the danger is that we won't understand ourselves as receivers and preservers of clearing, that we too will just understand ourselves as resources. And so all we will want to be doing is switching around and getting the most out of our possibilities and adapting flexibly to any situation that comes along. And we won't have any more sense of ourselves as having any kind of role in the way things show up or any kind of freedom about how things show up. We would just be sort of, Heidegger thinks it will be frenzied. I don't know why it might not be sort of elegant or something, but anyway, we will be just constantly adapting to new situations and as flexibly as possible. So that technology as a mode of revealing necessarily denies that it has no place for that it is a mode of revealing that we're receiving and that we're receivers or disclosers. So another way to put this is, when we in the other clearings, we would have a sense that we were. Okay, I'm not sure I want to read this. I'm not sure it's right. Well, it does seem like this, but I don't feel I have a good grip on the phenomena. That in the other modes of revealing, we're called to get in tune with them, and that we're back to this again. They need us to flourish, and the more we get in tune with them, the more they become the dominant mode of revealing. In technicity, of course, we're not sensitive to technicity as the current style, but that current style is part of this style. To deny that there's anything like being receptive and getting in tune with and preserving, because that current style is just flexibly adapting. Those are just partly words. This is an open thing for somebody who's writing a paper, if you want to write more about, which is just exactly what is the special danger of technicity. But now let me go on. Whatever, that's the best I could do right now. So the next move is the funny reversal. And what is Heidegger trying to bring about? Well, if we became sensitive to technicity as a mode of revealing, then we become sensitive to ourselves as receivers, preservers, and nurturers of that mode of revealing. And we'd be outside of that mode of revealing. We'd be outside the technological understanding of being. That's the sort of paradox. That it's the only one who, if you understand it as an understanding of being, you immediately understand. I guess they all might have that to some extent. I could see that in Christianity too, if you understood that being a creature was a mode of revealing, you'd have a different view of God than the metaphysical God. Because you could still be a Christian. Heidegger's trying to figure out a way to be a Christian in a non-metaphysical way. But the idea that you could understand the technicity was a mode of revealing and that your job was to be receptive. You can't understand that and think that the basic way you're related to everything is challenged and forth. Once you see that you're being challenged forth to challenge forth, you're being called to challenge forth, you're the receiver of this call to challenge forth, you've already understood that you're not just a resource, and that there's something important going on that isn't challenging forth, namely receiving and perpetuating this particular style. That's certainly what he thinks. So we would understand ourselves as harboring the clearing, as cultivating a technological style, and we could then resist the technological style, and we could cultivate other styles. I, I think I'm going to read one passage which I didn't read, which seems to me to have a lot of this stuff in it, on page 32. The top of page 32, every destiny or revealing comes to pass from out of a granting, and as such a grant, for it is a granting that conveys to man that share in revealing, which is the coming to pass, which the coming to pass of revealing needs. I mean, there's all this emphasis on our role that revealing needs us. As the one so needed and used, man is given to belong to the coming to pass of truth. The granting that sends in one way or another into revealing is as such the saving power. That's the reversal. That is, once you understand it as a granting, you already are saved from it. That's what I'm trying to explain. For the saving power lets man see and enter into the kingdom, enter into the highest worthiness, might be better than dignity, the highest worthiness of his essence. What is the highest worthiness of your essence? To be the place where clearings happen, and to be the preserver and safeguarder and focuser, so to speak, of the clearing. This dignity lies, in here's language, is in keeping watch over unconcealment, and with it from the first, the concealment of all, to the and with it from the first, the concealment, naturally they go together, of all coming to presence on this earth. It is precisely an inframing which threatens to sweep man away into ordering as the supposed single way of revealing, and so thrust man into the danger of the sphere of his free essence. It is precisely in this extreme danger that the innermost, indestructible belongingness of man within granting may come to light, provided that we, for our part, begin to pay heed to the coming to the presence of technology. That's sort of the moral of all that I would read. So I think, now I'm going on in my version. So I think there's really several different ways that we get a free relation to technology. One of them is a non-way, but I used to talk about it, and I still think it's illuminating to talk about, but it's not our way. And one of the things you need to see clearly, the technicity is not technological stuff. And one thing we could do, we can't do it, but I mean, imagine that we could. We could just say, we'll keep our technological stuff, but we'll just stop having an understanding of being. That means we've got all these efficient things around, but we won't think that that everything should be made as efficient as possible. Now, I could at least explain what that would be like. We can't do it, but the Japanese can do it, or did do it. I mean, for a long time, they kept, I don't know whether they still have, but they kept their understanding of the teacup and of tradition and of the thousands of gods and of the household gods. At the same time, they were fanatics for Sonys and cameras and televisions and the most technological country in the world, I suppose. That is, when I visited Japan, I always tell people this because I was so struck by it. I visited a very modern family. I think that the guy in charge was some kind of scientist, but nonetheless, his wife kneeled at the table to serve him dinner in the traditional way, and the family had the family gods and the television set on the same shelf and took them equally seriously, as far as I could see. And that's what it would be like to have technological devices without a technological understanding of being. And it's not important that we can separate them. But that's not something we can do, because we are in the understanding of being, and we can't just step out of it and change our attitude to it. That style pervades our practices and defines us as 20th century Western people. So what can we do? Well, if we understand that we're the preservers of this thing, there are two options that we've got that we didn't have before. Before, our only two options, Heidegger says, are to press on with it in a frenzied sort of way, or to resist it in a Luddite sort of way, both of them being unfree relations to it. But now, he says, he opens up a new possibility, I think, though he never spells it out. If it's a mode of revealing, then we can receive it and further it where we feel it's appropriate, like in word processors when we're writing our papers. And we can resist it and prefer some other mode of revealing, and nurture some other mode of revealing. So when we're writing, say, personal letters, I still admire my French friends who always write to me in writing, and I wish I could do that. I could do. I'm free to do that, and I should do that. And anybody, and Heidegger certainly would want us to do that. And if you write your love letters on a word processor, you're really far gone. Or send them by email. But, and so that's the first thing. We would be able to, free relation technology, I think, means being efficient in those domains where it's appropriate to be efficient, or, I mean, there's no right answer, but where it seems to us to be appropriate to be efficient, and in other areas where other understandings of being seem appropriate. When you're gardening, for instance, you can't hardly garden efficiently, but you would be gardening nurturingly, and you wouldn't have a feeling that you were wasting your time, which is what you would feel if you were really in the grip of the technological understanding of being. You're wondering why you aren't getting sort of more fertilizer or having your plants shipped in and shipped out as they, or whatever, or just give up on gardening altogether because it isn't very efficient. So that's the first thing. And of course, part of the sub-point of the first thing is you wouldn't ever think of treating yourself as a reason, because you know, I mean, you could treat some aspects of your life, I suppose, in which you tried to maximize your efficiency. But you never think that who you were was an efficiency maximizer, because you'd always sense that who you were was a discloser who could choose to further, who was called upon by all these different modes of revealing, and you could further with the mode of revealing that you felt was appropriate. My 2 points are really 1 point, because I said and my second point was we can cultivate other modes of revealing. How does that differ? Oh, I see. Well, I did mix them together, but I don't have to make. Well, I think they are the same. To say that you're efficient when it's appropriate and resist efficiency when it's not is the same as to say you cultivate other modes of revealing. And there I was giving the children example again, where you think that it's when you're raising your children, you don't have to do it efficiently. Now, I take it, this is my last, yeah.
I think maybe you could say a little bit about why they're the same point.
Okay, so obviously, why would you think they weren't?
Well, I mean, the reason they have to be the same point is that you can't just not resist efficiency.
In the name, without in the name of some other thing. Right, why they're the same point. And I didn't realize it, but now I did. I mean, yes, to resist, either you'd be resisting it blindly and in a Luddite way, which is what you could do if you were still in the grip of it. Or you now understand that it's a mode of revealing, and then you're free to resist it, but in the name of the cultivation of, receiving of, harboring of some other mode of revealing that's still around. And I take it that that's what restores our freedom, and that's our freedom. We're free to cultivate other modes of revealing. We're not free just to reject technology. There will be times when when getting in tune with efficiency and cultivating efficiency will be just what it feels like we ought to be doing, and that's fine. Okay, it restores our freedom, and that means that it prepares the way, but it only prepares the way. This is where we were last time at the end, to get out of the level, well, no, again, I've combined two things. Understanding that it's a mode of revealing prepares the way out of the level, the frantic, dispersed world we're in. Now, it prepares the way, and then we've got 2 or 3 possibilities. I think 3 possibilities. The one I just said, further other modes of revealing. Another possibility, now we're for the 2 at the end. The Heidegger doesn't say that. I'm saying that. The 2 that Heidegger mentions at the end that we're prepared for. I take it in my story, when we understand that it's a mode of revealing, we know we have to further it sometime, or we're called to, and we can be called by others. I said that. But that's not yet enough to save us. And then he has 2 more things that could save us. One, we could get a new God. It's a possibility. that we will get a whole new understanding of being. Wait, but I think I may be continuing to contradict myself. Is that what you're going to say?
No.
Okay, I was going to say, we can do that as long as the marginal practices aren't used up. I mean, if it gets bad, and as long as we haven't turned ourselves into resources, but it's getting more and more unlikely and more dangerous and game to play. But it's still possible that some new work of art could come along that and give us a whole reconfigure, take marginal practices and make them central, give us a whole new way of life. Yes, ma'am.
Would that new God have to be galactic? Would it have to be a God that showed itself as?
I think so, right. I think
it's got that free relationship.
Right. I think, yeah, well, not because you had a free relation, although that would be part of it. If you understood this mode of revealing as a mode of revealing, you would then be prepared for a God that revealed itself as a style and as a God, and not just think that this was the way things were. You would be at least like the pre-Socratics with their temple were supposed to be. And they knew that the temple was not for everybody and not forever, like the metaphysicians thought, but just for the time that it works. But you'd also understand, which they didn't understand, that it works by showing a style and by our being preservers. I mean, they sort of understood it. I mean, that's what puzzling. The Athenians understood it. What more would you understand? That's now what puzzles. Even if it was the ultimate God, the last God, what would it show you that the Oresteia people didn't know?
I guess you would say the Spartans were barbarians.
You mean that you had the right answer? That's interesting. So Liz got an interesting answer. I mean, the Athenians didn't just think that they had some temporary understanding which was terrific and that they were preservers of it. They weren't metaphysicians either, in which they, thought that it was true for everybody, everywhere, for all the time and forever. But they did think it was the best one around, and they said so. And that already suggests that it's something tending toward metaphysics about it. Maybe. I mean, this isn't something we have to get straight. Yeah, Forrest.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm one sentence from the end, and then there is a new God story, but it's so brief at the end of the technology thing that we would have to fill it out. Maybe we will be able to fill it out. I told you, I think, did I tell you already that there's the chance that we're going to get this? I don't think I did. Did I tell you already? Okay, I said yes. Don't buy Time and Being. Well, what I've asked for is the part of this Beiträge book which is called The Last God, or The Ultimate God, and maybe we'll find out when we read that in English. Reading it in German, I certainly find that chap. Okay, and the other way is that we would hope in the humble power, in the saving power of the humble things. And that's where we're going to go from here after we have a stop for discussion. Okay, Forrest.
Yeah, given that these ways of revealing are forward, that we can either get into them or out of them. It appears that you have to tell me if this is what you mean, that we would end up here with two different understandings of being, a technological understanding, and then this marginal practice way of understanding, a nurturing understanding. We would become and that we receive this through our willing, through our doing, through our resistance.
I see.
Which seems not really.
No, that can't be right.
No,
that can't be right. The first half is right, and a good way to put it. I mean, we wouldn't any understanding of being seems total. That's because it's an understanding of being. It defines what there is. It's only because we would understand that the technological understanding of being is itself a granting. And so are the other understandings of being, that we would then see, well, they can't all be a story about what there is, and we'd be outside of them if we could see this, and be able then, it wouldn't be somehow that we could just sort of freely pick and choose among them, right? It would be like different ones would call us and pull us in at various times, and we were with our children, the nurturing one would pull us in, and we wouldn't feel guilty and feel that we had to be efficient. And when we were at our word processor, the technological way of doing things, technicity would pull us in, efficiency, and we wouldn't feel that we should be writing pen letters. That makes sense to me. Now, the question is, how did we get a chance to do this, Forrest is asking, and rightly so, because if they were our total understanding of being, how could we ever get out of it? Well, there must be some point in Heidegger writing this essay and going around and giving this lecture, though that's sort of, he understands, kind of hardly going to save us. At least it's an attempt. I mean, the idea is, if you could get people to see that technicity was an understanding of being, which is to perform a kind of Nietzschean genealogy on it, to take it out of the taken for granted, the way things are, and make it seem to be a gift that requires us to nurture it. My point is, and Heidegger says this, it would immediately flip around. There would be a Gestalt switch. This is in an essay we haven't read called The Turning. It would turn around. And it would, and the way it would turn around, I presume, is that we would no longer, it couldn't anymore be our total understanding, because it's got this contradiction in it. Let me say it again. It's an understanding of being that denies that there is any such thing as receiving understandings of being, has no place for that. And so now, when you understand that it's an understanding of being, you immediately are out of it in some way.
Can we in the West ever not be in a total understanding? And if you're out of it, then we need a new understanding of being we don't have.
Well, we if we're out of it, we've got two possibilities left, it seems to me. We're never so far out of it, because some practices or other, we've got all these styles still around, including the efficiency style, and that's the styles we've been raised in. There's still Christian practices around and nurturing practices around, and we're not out in the nowhere practices. We're not in folly practices. So the most we can do is get this loosened up relation to these understandings of being, which now turn out to be various styles which call to us. And we are only free, and Forrest is trying to emphasize our unfreedom, which is right. We're not sort of, as he puts it, liberal or Cartesian egos standing outside of everything and freely choosing them. The most we can say is we're constantly being called into, drawn into some style of practices, some mode of revealing or another. But no mode of revealing would anymore have this kind of total grip on us. That's what it would be to have a free relation, I think, to technology, in my reading. I mean, it's hard to figure out, and you certainly wouldn't get it by reading this essay. And that's why Heidegger is not greatly optimistic. He's fearing that the world is going to come to an end. Literally, the world will come to an end, because there won't be any disclosures and there won't be any worlds. There'll just be all these efficient resources going around efficiently manipulating themselves and everything else. Yeah.
If we have this scenario where the styles, these different styles are floating around the raise the same criticism against Heidegger as an idolist, as he did against
right.
You know, the values.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that. But you're right. If you, I mean, you put in a clause that I was definitely trying to avoid, that none of them grip us.
You said that. That's why.
Did I say that? Did I? I thought I said just the opposite. Anyway, I meant to say that. What did I say?
I think you said that.
Oh, anyway, I'm glad you thought so, because now I can at least make clear that I don't want to. Anyway, no, if that happened, we would be pure, free floating egos, or we'd be sort of turning them all into technology, because we would be choosing whichever one seems to get the most out of the possibilities. We'll nurture now, and we'll be religious. I mean, it sounds a little bit like the Japanese thing, which I've heard. It's not a joke. You know, there are more. If you ask in Japan what religion people belong to, there are more. How do we put it? There are more members of the various religions than there are people in Japan, because they belong to several religions. And it's someone Japanese told me it was very popular right now to get born with a Shinto ceremony, married with a Christian ceremony, and have your funeral with a Buddhist kind of ceremony. Now, it's all right in Japan, because they're not technological, but you can imagine a kind of technological world in which you just sort of all the practices became resources and you just played with them. And that's sort of Nietzschean. Nietzsche talks about how the free spirit plays with all the cultural resources of the culture. Certainly it's not that, but it's not even sort of freely picking whatever kind of mode of revealing is around Not just because it's most efficient, but just because it seems appropriate, as I put it. That was when I was not quite right. You don't pick it because it seems appropriate. When I got it right, I said, you let yourself be drawn into and used by and received as a gift various modes of revealing whenever one of them comes along. And then I want to say, and if you're playing with your children, you will be drawn into the nurturing mode, maybe you won't. But that's the picture. It won't be nihilism. It will be a kind of polytheism. A nurturing God will be shining on you at that point. Yeah.
Okay, then one of the criteria for the understanding of being is that there are no interests anymore. So with the example of your
Right.
computer.
Yeah.
When you're writing the love letter, then you're checking the computer. And it didn't work processing machine, so
Well, it doesn't have an essence anymore. I'm not sure what you're saying. Do you understand what I'm saying? You look like you do.
Well, if we really have simulation technology, could you just use the word processor, but in a non-technicity way?
To do what? To write the
Write love letter.
in a non-technical
That's
way.
if you choose to write love letter, then not like the people in France that are very different. Right, oh yeah, I mean,
Oh, I see. Okay, you're writing it with a pen.
then it's like the computer is now being concealed.
Yes, I mean,
Whatever the computer is, it has different essences still. Like even if you have different styles, and things still don't have. Even if you don't.
I see. No, I think I understand you. It looks like things will have essences or not, depending on which understanding of being you're in. And when you're in the technological one, the computer will just be the perfect orderer of everything. And insofar as you were really in it, it would order your love letters and order your business letters and order your term papers and so forth. But if you get in touch with the nurturing practices, then boy, do things have essences. You want to bring out the essence of your child, and when you're gardening, you want to let the plants flourish in their way, and so forth. And of course, nothing intrinsically. You would then know a non-metaphysical thing about essence. That essences aren't there because God made the things that way, or the good made them that way. And things have essences only relative to certain kinds of practices. But if you got into those practices, things would be revealed to you as having essences.
I still think there's probably technological understanding of being, and that if you have a different style, that even if you don't teach the style,
Yeah.
then there's still like you said with yourself, you don't think of yourself as being efficient all the time. Like when you're with your child, you're not be efficient worker. So still, even if a new style over time, when you're in the presence of your child, you still don't have this essence. There's just one psychological.
You don't have a fixed essence as you would if there were. No, you don't have a fixed. I mean, we're talking about us. No, we would be disclosing. What? Nobody has, even the child. Well, that's right in a way. I mean, the child can show up in Heidegger world as a resource to get enhanced and to be made as versatile as possible, and to get over any tendency to just be one way and have one style. That it could do that. But the child could also show up as having sort of one destiny, which you're trying to find if you're in this romantic mood practices. And of course, that's sort of odd. But whenever you're in one of these worlds, that's what you're responding to, and you understand, presumably, if you're in this weird form of post-metaphysical state, that you don't have to claim that things have sort of eternal essences in order to treat them as if they have essences. I think that must be what it amounts to. I think you could treat the same tree as flexible lumber and toothpicks and shade and all that in a very technological way, or you could treat that tree as having the possibility of flourishing into just what its telos required. And things are just like that. I mean, I don't know if that helps things. That's the weird world, but that's my version of the Heidegger world. Did I see an hand? Yeah.
The idols or ways of being as going in at the salad bar and today this way.
No, that's the rich
Right.
boy.
So, okay, there must be something that you want to say about commitment or authenticity, because otherwise, why, maybe your French friends just believe that there's something to be said about the personal letter, because they're adopting a style where the personal letter, pen to paper, made sense, or it was very important then.
Right.
So it seems to me that where do we get, are we just constantly then borrowing back other styles that we somehow?
I think so, but wait, we don't pick them. I mean, I want to just don't pick too many things so we can say. We don't want to pick the modes. And it isn't even, I think, helpful much to think about authenticity but that's such a long story, I don't know. And I don't think it's a question of commitment either. None of that feels right. What feels right is this view that the situation could draw. You have all sorts of skills. You have nurturing skills, you have objectifying skills, you have efficiency skills, because you grew up in this culture. And different situations would draw, that's why I'm going to say you wouldn't choose, but different situations would draw different actions out of you. This is why Heidegger got interested in polytheism, where he likes the idea that the Homeric Greeks understood that when Aphrodite was around, everything showed up as erotic, and it wasn't up to you. That was the light that was shining at that point, and you had the skill to respond to things that way. And then Aries showed up, and everything shows up under aggressiveness and warriorness, and then again, you can't choose. Things show up for you that way. Heidegger thought that was terrific, and he would like to have that back, I think. Does that help him?
It does.
Okay. I want to stop with this, but Forrest, I think, want to say one more thing.
Well, just the idea is that sounds a little bit too being in time-oriented, because by the time you need a work of art to show this way. So I don't understand this phenomenon being the work of importance.
I see. Well,
Talk about these practices.
yeah.
But in order for that ways of revealing to be shown, it's something like a work of art.
Okay. Well, of course, for them to be all governing, you need a work of art. But none of them are all governing anymore. Technicity managed to do its job without any work of art, and even it was, it almost got to be, and it could be all governing. So, what is it? You need. It isn't as if there's a complication I never thought about. To have an understanding of being which has meaningful differences and mattering, you need a work of art, sure. An earth and world need to struggle, so forth. But it turns out you can have one without a work of art, namely the technicity one, but it's a flat one, and because it hasn't got any earth and hasn't got any struggle and hasn't got any mattering anymore. That's one point. But even the early ones, they're around now, not as focused, all governing modes of revealing, because their works of art are dead, but the practices are still around. Heidegger certainly talks, he says other modes of revealing are around. He says this funny thing in his letter to the student, I noticed at the end, an interesting line if you're thinking about these things. He says at the bottom of 184, in the destiny of being, there is never a mere sequence of things one after another. Now, and framing, it says now frame, but that should be now in framing, then world and thing. Rather, there is always a passing by and simultaneity with the early and the late. That's one. That's part of it. But let me read you another one. And the first full paragraph on 184. The default of God in the divinities is absence, but absence is not nothing. This is more apropos for what Forrest said. It is precisely the presence which must first be appropriated of the hidden fullness and wealth of what has been, and what thus gathered is presencing of the divine in the world of the Greeks, in prophetic Judaism, in the preaching of Jesus. That is, they're still around somehow, even though the God is gone. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, I'm going to make a switch, okay? The last thing, we know what a new God would be. And we know and how that would save us. It would be, let me just put it this way because it's important to what I want to say next, a new understanding of being, a new all-governing understanding, where everything would show up, having some characteristics and mattering would be. And remember, I gave you the example. Think of the Earth goddess, and the fact that everything could show up in terms of ecology in the Earth, and all that worthiness would be whether you were serving the Earth, or the badness would be whether you were hurting the Earth. You can make up the story. So, but we know what that would look like, a new God. So roughly, we don't know in concrete terms, but we can imagine things. Anyway, but what we don't know anything about is things thinking. And from now on, we're going to talk about things thinking the rest of today and all of next Tuesday. If I found my watch, I'd know what the rest of today was. Here it is.
25 minutes.
Half an hour. Okay, I found my keep me. Okay, so now, and we need at least to get somewhere with things thinking so that you can appreciate why I'm talking about that speech. So let's plunge in. I used to think that things thinking were like mini works of art. That is, they somehow organized and held up a world. And they are somewhat like mini works of art. Heidegger says in Building, and Thinking, he talks about how they shine and they do whirl the world. He says that clearly by the end of the day. But they're also in very important ways unlike a work of art. Clearly, the most important way is they're not all governing. They don't set up a struggle between earth and world, and therefore they don't set up history. So there's some new sort of ontological category, and we got to find out what it is. Now, he starts out in a way that is very oblique, and the whole thing it's a weird essay. If it means maybe it means something entirely different than I think it does. And if it does, maybe all the stuff that I don't see as relevant is relevant. But I have a lot of trouble making much sense of it as it starts out. It's worried about the fact that there's no nearness, and that television has abolished all distance and so forth on page 165. And that means there's no distinction between the near and the far. But it turns out that that's not a question of distance. That's just kind of metaphor for what's missing. And nearness, as spatial nearness, is a kind of metaphor for what you want. So we don't really know clearly what's missing. And we don't really know what we want. We just got these sort of empty words. Nearness is missing, and nearness is what we want. Only by the end would you understand, and when you see that feast will you understand what nearness is. Because, take my word for it, at the feast, they've got nearness, and it isn't because they're all in the same room. That's not the point. Okay. So, what is missing? Well, I'm going to just say it now, so that it won't seem mysterious. What's missing is that we aren't sort of enclosed together for some temporary period in a local world in which we sense that we share with the others enclosed in it the activity of preserving it. Something like that. What nearness is being in a mini world. That's what I think. And Heidegger's changing his understanding of world, because in being in time, the notion of a mini world, temporary and local, doesn't make any sense. And in the origin of the work of art and through the whole history of being, it doesn't make any sense. You've got to give up the notion that world and being have anything to do with each other, because being is always about everything that is. But this thinking essay isn't about everything that is. And so really he shouldn't ever mention being in this essay. And I was amazed one day, first to discover that he hardly ever does, and that made me very happy. And then to discover that at one point, when he's talking about mortals, he does. That made me very unhappy. Then I discovered something which I'm not going to even tell you yet, where he comes out on my side. And he, in effect, says, and you'll have to find out why gradually, where things think being is not only irrelevant, being is gone. And that's very interesting. And I think he sees that where being is still something that matters and makes a difference, things thinking are going to be, if not blotted out, sort of obscured. But I can't explain that very clearly yet. Although you can sort of see what's happening. There's a kind of antagonism between the total and the local. such that you guys are going to have one, you're going to sort of put the other one out. Yes.
So did you say a partial world or like
A small world. Did I say a partial world? Okay, yeah, I shouldn't. A mini world, what I said. A small world. Yes. Okay, so let's keep going at this because I want to get as far as I can. He said, so he makes this fast transition, which I just don't buy for a minute, that at least you can't believe it as it goes. Well, we want to talk about nearness. Well, what's near? Well, things are near. Look at that. So let's talk about things. That's what he says on 166, and that gets us to things. Near to us, he says in the last paragraph, are what we usually call things. And he's off. Boy, is that all very strange. But I mean, he knows what he's doing. It's just we don't know what he's doing. I mean, he's trying to show us that things, when they thing, form a world, and that's what nearness really is. But if you don't know that, you have no idea what's going on. And then he goes into this long discussion of the jug, which isn't all that illuminating either. It turns out that what's important really isn't the thing, the jug, but it's something like what the jug does. And what the jug does is sort of take part in for instance, a celebratory meal or a feast. And then you're getting closer to what things are. But he does this strange detour in which he does start with the jug, and he goes on and on about the jug, starting on 168. And the jug comes into its own in the second paragraph, but that which is the jug's nature, its own, is never brought about by its making. The self-supporting jug has to gather itself for the task it contains. Well, he's sort of smuggling in there this important notion of gathering. Gathering is the most important concept or, notion in this. Gathering is what the thing does. And he's starting to talk about gathering. Now, then he gets that the wine, that the jug holds wine, and it's empty, and that science doesn't understand it's empty because it thinks it's got a fluid in it called air, and this all seems to me somewhat a waste of time to talk about all that. What's important is he's getting around to the role of the jug in a feast. I'm partly preparing you for Babette's feast, and partly for Borgman, both of whom think that the movie and Borgman, that what's really important is what Borgman calls focal practices, which is a way that things can gather together. People and lots of other stuff, which we haven't talked about yet. But he talks about the celebration of the feast at the bottom of 172. This is what the jug does. When it stills and elevates the celebration of the feast. The gift of the pouring now is neither given in and in, nor is the poured gift a drink for mortals. The outpouring is the libation poured out for the immortal gods. The opposite of a celebratory feast and the jug's role in a celebratory feast is just having a shot of whiskey in the bar by yourself in an efficient way before your drive home. I mean, this is sort of Mothers Against Drunk Driving have sort of got rid of this, but Heidegger's still complaining about it on 173, where he says that this pouring decays at the end of the top full paragraph, the top non-full paragraph. And the pouring in and pouring out decays into the dispensing of liquor at the bar. Pouring, the outpour, is not a mere filling in decanters. So the sort of efficient, quick drink is not what it's about. And that's sort of the opposite of what he's interested in. So let's go on more about the gathering. What does it gather? Well, this weird thing. It gathers the fourfold on page 173, in the middle. In the gift of the outpouring earth and sky, divinities and mortals dwell together all at once. These four at one, because of what they themselves are, belong together. Perceiving everything that is present, they are enfolded into a single fourfold. So there is the fourfold, he writes like this: sky, earth, divinity. What did he say? Divinities there? What? Divinities. Well, the mortals are down here. Mortals. He writes it. Therefore, now I have to give away this thing. He writes it like an X, and what gets crossed out by it is being. He doesn't write that to do it in here, but in another essay. So that's the fourfold. the fourfold of these four is going to cross out being, because it's not going to be important anymore that everything has something or other in common. What's important is that this particular feast, for instance, is pulling these people together, and the sky, and the earth, and the divinities. And that's what's going to be. That keep telling yourself, and that is inefficient. Moreover, it's not even any of the other modes of revealing. It's not efficient. It's not nurturing. It's not bursting forth. It's not a Christian creation. It's just a different story. Heidegger's just a remarkable character. Unlike any other philosopher, he just is full of surprises. Who would have thought that after thinking all this time about being, he would just drop it, cross it out, go off on some other path? He always says he's not got theses, he's on a path. Funny thing about Heidegger, he's not already, that's pretty unphilosophical, being on a path and not having a thesis or a goal. That he can be on several paths at once. He can go on thinking about being, and maybe a new God will save us, and start thinking about things being, which is the antithesis of that story. So you've got to really be agile to keep up with it. And then he pulls another amazing move. I mean, he really is in great form here, because he decides to discover what thing means. He's going to go back and look at the old German for thing. Well, that's familiar at the top of 174. He's always doing that. He's going back and looking at the Greek words and the German words to help you get a sense of the phenomena that he's talking about. So I'll come back to the fourfold. That right now, you've got to do this because it's relevant to why the fourfold crosses out being. What is gathered in the gift, down in the top of 174, gathers itself in appropriatingly staying the fourfold. This appropriatively is this word erideness, and it always means sort of brings things into its own. I mean, it brings the fourfold into its own. This manifold simple gathering is the jug's presencing. Our language denotes what a gathering is by the ancient word. The word is thing. The jug's presencing is the gathering of a one-fold, fourfold into a single time space. That's all right. And then he goes on, the things gathered, thing gathered. You see, that's where gathering is clearly the most important. Appropriating the fourfold, it gathers the fourfold, and so forth. Now, and now we've got this German word thing. What are we going to do with it? Well, at the bottom of 174, this is where it really gets surprising. It just threw me off for about 15 years of teaching it. Because I assumed that what he was getting out of the old German word must be what he wanted to get out of it. So he says, in Old High German, thing means a gathering to deliberate on a matter under discussion, a contested matter. In consequence, the old German word things and ding become the name for the affairs of matters of pertinence. They denote anything that any way bears upon men, concerns them, is a matter for discourse. And then he says it's the same as the res publica, which means not the state, the bottom of the page, but that which known to everyone concerns everyone and is deliberated in public. Well, if you have any feel for what I've said so far, this is beginning to be very confusing. Because now this is what made me think the thing was a mini work of art. It looks like what it's doing is sort of, there's a struggle of interpretation about something that's very meaningful and matters to the whole community. And when they are all there debating it, that's what it is for there to be a thing. But then he suddenly says, and this is the funny part, well, he goes on and on about it, on and on and on about that. And then he says at the bottom of 175, but the decisive point now is not at all the short semantic history we've given of phrase, being, causes, shows, and thing, but something altogether different, to which no thought here, whatever, has heretofore been given. So, never mind all this etymology. What I want to talk about is not that at all. And at that point, the whole point of all this seems to me to be very puzzling. But I think the point is that what he doesn't want to talk about is that the thing has to do with what is of public concern to everybody, because what he wants to talk about is, well, here's the strongest statement. This is really, if we go through all this etymology, now look at 177. Neither the general long outworn meaning of the term thing as used in philosophy, nor the old High German meaning of the word thing, however, are of the least help. Well, there goes etymology. And there goes why he did the last 3 pages, except maybe just to blow the minds of people like me and you, who expect him to do something. But he has one semantic factor in the old usage of the word thing, namely gathering, does speak to the nature of the chug, and that's that. So, okay, drop the public concern, drop what concerns everybody, drop mattering, drop meaningful differences, just gather. And we're back, after such a strange detour, to where we were before. Now let me see where I am. Okay. But now you can see why being is going to be crossed out, because being is that where there are shared meaningful differences and shared mattering, that concerns everybody about everything. That's not the issue. Only gathering matters. And that's another sense in which things are humble. They're not like the temple or a tragedy or even a god. All of which, well, I don't know about a god. They're not like God, like a capital G. All of which are these total, everybody agrees important, something like it. They're not like that. It's more like having a glass of wine together. And and the celebration of the feast, well, I'm going to back over that. And then that gathers the fourfold. And that's what nearness is. We're going to get the fourfold in a minute. Okay. The thing sings, I'm at the bottom of 177. It stays earth and sky, divinities and mortals. The thing brings the four in there. I'm not sure remoteness is right. It's the German is farness. I don't know what to think. Maybe that's the thing. It brings them near to one another. I wouldn't worry about it. This bringing near is nearing. See, but what I want to read is now we discover what nearness is. It's not a distance. It's somehow that all these things get related to each other and to the people. And it's a different kind of near, but that's what nearness is. Nearing is the present thing of nearness. Nearness brings, and then we got to change the translation. Brings near, cross out the draws nigh to one another. It brings near the far, and indeed as the far. Nearness preserves farness. That is, it keeps separate earth and world and mortals and divinities while interrelating them. It doesn't fuse them into one thing, and it doesn't disperse them all over the world, all over. It gathers them in some funny new way that he's trying to get. He says preserving, you have to translate this next, preserving, comma, farness. The near is near. I tried to figure this out once. Preserving farness. The near vase, that is, that's normal word that we don't know how to translate it, but so nearness functions in, so farness functions in its nearness. I mean, all this is very weird. The translation is trying desperately to make sense of it, but it's getting it all wrong. Not that getting it right makes it much clearer. Then it's bringing near, or nearing, in this way. Nearing conceals its own self and remains its own way nearest of all. I'm sorry I read it. I don't find that helpful. So let me go on to what I do find helpful. Okay, let's try to talk about the fourfold. That's what I think I could sort of make some sense of. So to understand what's going on here, we should understand how it unites the fourfold in a way that it brings them near, brings them together, keeps them separate, stabilizes them for a while, but doesn't sort of fix them in any final unity. That's all what he's trying to get at. But I think, and there's some disagreement between me and lots of other Heideggerians, that we have to sort of generalize the fourfold. When Heidegger talks about fourfold, he says, well, the earth is that stuff we walk on and grow plants in, and the sky is that blue up there where the stars and sun go by, and so forth. I think, at least for me to understand it, and how they take part in a celebratory meal, for example. So there are lots of other cases where things seem too. But let's stick to that one. He lists a whole bunch of them. Anyway, I'm going to try to generalize them into more sort of functions of this special kind of gathering. It has, you could say, the special kind of gathering that produces nearness or produces what I'm going to call a temporary local world has four aspects. And here they are. First, the earth is, I'm on 178. He says, earth is the building bearer, nourishing with its fruits, tending water and rock, plant and animal. Well, I hope earth is still what it was in the origin of the work of art, namely that which is withdrawn, concealed, and makes something matter, but no longer, of course, everything matter, but just something matter in this local situation for a while. And it's the sensuous, and you see a lot of that in Babette's speech, and it's what you can't make clear and conceptualize. And the making clear function, which used to be the world, is now the sky, because the world is going to be the name for the result of all these aspects. And what is the sky? Well, he says the sky is the sun's path and the moon and the stars and the blue depth of the ether. Not much help for me. I want to say the sky is what is manifest, where things are brought out, where, well, I don't want to use the word things, where whatever it is has clarity. It's brought out in clarity. And then there are the divinities. Those are the gods, the messengers of the Godheads, so forth. Well, the divinities are the what you are grateful to. And it's all helpful now. When you have a celebratory feast, you can get all the people together and the good food gets cooked and everything gets ready and the people are all there, and it just might not work. How many have read Virginia Woolf To the Lighthouse? Okay, To the Lighthouse is terrific because there is Mrs. Dalloway's big feast in the middle of it. That is, she's trying to make a thing, and she's trying to do the same thing as Babette's trying to do. Only it doesn't work at first because, as I recall, I haven't gone back and read it, the men are all talking politics. And so they got the wrong view of the thing, so to speak. The old German view. They think that what they should be doing is discussing matters of shared concern. And that exactly keeps it from being a closed world and opens it out into all the other things that they're quarreling about and the conflicting interpretations of these public affairs. But at a certain point, remember, she serves her special dish, the boeuf en daube, which is just so good, and the wine is so good that they forget all. And the dinner works. And when it works, she feels that she's got a moment of eternity. I think Virginia Woolf sort of blew it there. I don't think she read Heidegger. She wouldn't have said a moment of eternity. But she would have said the thing, and look at this, it's gathering the earth and the sky and the mortals and the divinity. And I'm talking about the mortals. There's a moment in which, and the eternity is supposed to be a grasp at it, in which you feel indebted to something that you don't control, that is what you receive this as a gift, that this is working. And if you're secular, you say grace. And if you're if you're religious, you say grace, and you thank the gods literally for it. If you're secular, you give a toast, and you're grateful that we're all together on this occasion and so forth. But there's got to be this dimension of it's not under our control and it's not efficient. If it's happening not out of some, it's a gift. That's the divinity part. It's the gratitude part. Now, the mortals are the weirdest part, because the mortals is where he starts talking about being. And he says, death is the shrine of nothing, at the bottom of 178. That is, that which in every respect is never something that exists. That's taught from being in time. That says that death can never be represented as an object. It doesn't seem very relevant here. He talks about the mystery of being. And not with the capital B, of course, is just as usual, just an artifact of the German. But it's big deal being of everything, and it's just not what he should be talking about. He talks at the end there. Mortals are who they are as mortals, present in the shelter of being. They are the presencing relation of being as being. Well, You can't have it both ways. I mean, if you're going to use this to cross out being, then you can't have the mortal sort of bringing it back in. I mean, it's as if he had a module in his word processor that was left over from being in time and pushed mortals, and a paragraph came out. It just doesn't seem to me to fit in here. I'm sorry about that, but I can't do anything with the mortals the way he does. I'd say, yeah, the mortals belong there, and here's how I would do it. There's a certain fragility about a thing thingy. The dinner. Now, I mean, it's not going to last forever, and it's you're lucky if it ever takes off at all. Grateful, lucky, blessed, whatever your variety of this is. And moreover, people, it's true that you get a certain identity within the thing thingy. That identity is fragile in the sense that you'll have a different identity when you get pulled into a different thing. I think that's interesting. In the family dinner, which Borgman is so interested in, what is brought out, and these things bring everything out into its own. So fathers are brought out into their own, and children and mothers and grandparents and everything at the family dinner. They all do what they do, and they shine, and they're at their best, and they've got those identities. And they are brought out in their own most, to talk like Heidegger. But then everybody goes off into another world, and the kid is in school, and the father's at work, and there may be things thinking there too, but they'll be brought out in their identity as CEO and class joker, or whatever their particular identity is in this other thing thinking, so that your identities are mortal in the sense that when you're in one of these, you don't have the sense that you are getting some stable understanding of who you are forever. That's gone. The stable understanding of who you are forever was a subject-object, autonomous, Kantian kind of understanding. I mean, it's not gone. It's now one of the things that can happen to you when you're writing a love letter to somebody who you are experiencing as the person that's going to be with you for the rest of your life and defines who you are. Then in that situation, you will experience yourself as having a lasting identity. I don't know what the mortality will then be the fragility of the whole relationship. You may lose it. But in any case, there's always going to be some sense of fragility. Now, all of that then discloses a world. And he says that over and over. But let's just read before time is up, which is 3 minutes. I could read you some of the best world disclosing passages. The bottom, it says, the appropriating mirror play of the simple one-fold of the earth and sky and so forth we call the world. And the world's presences by worldly. And then on 180, he keeps just saying it again and again, there's more going on now, and this is fun for the movies. You'll see. I think that Denise Denisoff, is that her name? I think, who wrote this, had read Heidegger. You'll see why. There's a kind of joke, I think, in there, but I won't tell you what it is. But there's something further going on that's important. That without, never mind the movie. It's important that the fourfold does not have a struggle, because the sky is not trying to cover everything, and the earth is not trying to keep from having everything covered if there is the sensuous side, the hidden side, and it's cooperating with the manifest side, and the gods are cooperating, and the identities are working. So there's no sense in which there's a struggle. In fact, it's more like a marriage, he says. And then he says it's a kind of ringing. I don't remember where the marriage. Oh, they're betrothed. It's all in the second full paragraph on 180. The the unity of the four presences is the appropriating mirror play of the betrothed, each to the other in simple oneness. So they're married instead of struggling. The four presences is the worlding of the world. The mirror play of the world is the round dancing of appropriating. Therefore, the round dance doesn't encompass the four like a hoop. The round dance is the ring that joins while it plays, as mirroring, appropriating. The gathering presence of the mirror play joins in this way the ringing. Keep your eye open for the round dance in the movie. And 181, the bottom line, I mean the top line of 181 is the bottom line of the story. The thing stays, gathers and unites the fourfold, the thing's world. That's the punchline. And I want to say that it's a local and temporary world. and it shines, and while it's shining, it's there, and then it suddenly comes into being. I'm just going to read a few things from this last page for a minute here. The first full paragraph. Whatever becomes a thing occurs out of the ringing of the world's mirror play. Only when all of a sudden, presumably, world whirls as a world, only then does the ring shine forth. So it's sudden and it shines, and that's when it starts working as a thing. The ringing of earth and divinities and so forth, it achieves a compliancy, a simple oneness. And that is nearness. Let me see if I have anything more to say. So it's a temporary local world that gathers together these dimensions and all the people and cuts them off from the shared concerns and the issues about understanding of people. But it gives them the sense that they're disclosures and preservers while it's working. And since that's what's really worthy about people, that they are disclosers and preservers, and that's where they're really free. The thing is a new way for them to get in touch with what it is that they are and what's worthy about them and their freedom. I mean, I think that's everything I want to say, but hold on a second. So what's near means everything in it, and what's far is everything outside it. Everything in that world is near, not necessarily spatially near, though maybe. And whatever is outside that world is just forgotten and far in that sense. So what's missing when nearness is missing is our sense of preserving worlds. And what's there when worlds are working is that we have that sense. And the nearest I can come to this, I'll read this paragraph, the last full paragraph on 181. When and in what way do things appear as things? They do not appear by means of human making. That would be subject object. But neither do they appear without the vigilance of mortals. Vigilance is now the nurturing story. The first step towards such vigilance is a step back from the thinking that merely represents to the thinking that responds when called. That doesn't pass that anything. But I've said all I have to say. Now we're going to run over and set up the movie and